Star Wars has fundamentally changed the way that we imagine. The way that we perceive the world through our imaginations has shifted because of this story. It's a shared experience that almost everyone has, at least almost every guy. If something has been that seminal to that many people, it's worth taking a look at. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. I'm JP, here with my brother.
Peter, we're here.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are the Pinedo Brothers, Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art. And today we're talking about the top 5 Star Wars stories that ever were. I had so much fun talking about the top 11 historical films that I was like, this week I want to have a little bit more fun. And so here we go. Pete, are you game?
Yes, sir.
Before we jump in, I wanted to say, please, if you like what you're hearing, follow us here on YouTube. Hit the little bell so you get alerted every time that we record. And also, feel free to check us out on PinedoBrothers.com. You can see more of our projects there. Okay, without any further ado, let's talk about this list. Top 5 Star Wars stories. So not just the movies, but anywhere that there's been a coherent beginning, middle, and end, that would qualify as a story. And that's what we'll be talking about. Pete, let's give them a little bit of background. Tell the folks what Star Wars means to you.
Star Wars has been a long time favorite for me. Ever since I was a kid, I always loved the character Darth Vader, which we talked about, I think, a couple of times in past episodes. But Darth Vader always stuck out to me because he was just he had this aura, this sense to him of power and and also when I was a kid, this is where me and JP are we always have a big disagreement. I could never get on board with the rebels.
Peter never liked seeing the stormtroopers die. So yeah, that was a non-starter.
Where I'm at this point, I'm do I even like Star Wars anymore? I don't know. Because I think I just like the stormtroopers and Darth Vader and don't really like the trilogy or whatever. But, it is what it is. I think that the Star Wars universe, just the stories and the universe really, I think formed my mind in many ways on my imagination. When I was a kid, that was all I did. I was imagining I was in the Star Wars world. I was a clone. I was a stormtrooper fighting in battles, or I was Anakin or Darth Vader. And that was me 24/7 when I was a kid. And so it really shaped my imagination in a lot of ways. And even in my book, I attribute Star Wars as one of the main stories that that formed the story, even though it has nothing to do with space or, that kind of sci-fi. But it's it's the way that it's just ignited my imagination and got me to think in storytelling terms. Because when I was a kid, I wouldn't just be shooting. I would be shooting and making up all of these stories,
Yeah.
And so every time I was playing, it was a whole involved story going on.
Absolutely. And you're not alone in that. But okay, I think you and I had very different introductions to the Star Wars universe. What was the first Star Wars story that you watched?
Well, I don't really know. I think I just know Star Wars from before I could remember, I guess I remember us watching episode 5 a lot, The Empire Strikes Back, watching that at home. And so that one was one of the first things I remember. But I also really remember episode 2, The Attack of the Clones, as one of the original things that stands out to me. I remember watching that at Papa's house in the third, the attic or something like that, whatever that room was.
Yeah.
Our grandfather's house. I remember watching Star Wars episode 2 and just thinking it was so cool, and then running around pretending I was a clone trooper getting shot and shooting at people.
Yeah. Well, Star Wars was a part of your childhood from the very beginning. As far as you can remember, you probably cannot remember a time before you had been introduced to this universe, because it was just there. It was different for me. The first time I watched Star Wars was I was probably 11 or 12. and I watched The Empire Strikes Back. No, not The Empire. I watched A New Hope, episode 4. So the original Star Wars that ever came out was my first introduction to it. And I was way behind everyone else. All my other friends had already seen, the prequels. But my dad was a purist. He was like, no, you got to wait. You got to wait till you're old enough and watch that. And I think by the time Peter came along, he was like, this is ridiculous. This is too many rules to have. If he wants to watch Star Wars, we're going to let him watch Star Wars. He was a little bit more, let's say, what can I say? Trying to implement a structure for me, I think, which I think both of us really appreciated what Star Wars was as children. I mean, I loved watching it when I did. And it seems like you got so much, your childhood was enriched by this story. And that's why we're looking at this, is that Star Wars has fundamentally changed the way that we imagine, the way that we perceive the world through our imaginations has shifted because of this story. It's a shared experience that almost everyone has, at least almost every guy. So this is, if something has been that seminal to that many people, it's worth taking a look at. So even if this wasn't a blast and a barrel of monkeys, which it is, it still would be worth doing. So we've got a twofold reason for being here and talking about this list. Shall we get to it?
Get to it.
Okay. Top 5, starting with number 5. We've already talked about it, Star Wars Episode 4, the original, the OG.
The OG. When Star Wars Episode 4 came out, am I correct? It originally didn't have any extra qualifying names. It wasn't Episode 4.
On the poster, it just said Star Wars.
Yeah, it wasn't Hope or anything. It was just Star Wars. They weren't even sure if they were going to make other Star Wars.
Well, they weren't sure if it was going to work. And that's why this movie is so amazing, is that it really shouldn't have worked. Up till now, sci-fi's had just not been a real important part of Americana. Yeah. Or
it wasn't a blockbuster kind of genre. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's kind of a niche, a little small segment of the population, only in America, was interested in it. This was a worldwide phenomenon when it broke out. It was the most popular film, the most successful film monetarily that had ever happened in an instant, it seemed. And it came out of nowhere. It was a low budget for a studio film. It was still a studio film released by Fox. But for a studio film, it was a very low budget film that wasn't supposed to do much. Lucas was out, I think, in Hawaii, resting up, expecting to hear bad news. And all of a sudden his phone rings and, oh my gosh, it's doing great. So this was a monumental seismic shift in the way stories are told. And it was, besides the fact that it was so successful, not every movie that's successful is actually a good story. This is actually an excellent story, built upon an archetype. You're introduced to the young hero, Luke Skywalker, who just loses at every chance he can get. He's constantly just not up to snuff. He can't even do the easy little training things that his wise wizard mentor, another archetype, tries to teach him how to do. And then when his wise wizard dies, before he can even complete any training, it seems very much like this hero's journey is going to be ended before it starts. But that is exactly how heroes' journeys actually go. And Lucas knew that. He was a pupil of Campbell, who was a pupil of Jung, who studied these mythos, these mythologies, and he imbued that knowledge into the storytelling that he was creating. And that's something that we're going to see. That's why we're not just focusing on the movies here, because a myth is told by everyone. It's not just from one source. Peter, what are your thoughts on Star Wars Episode 4?
Well, you're making me laugh because I was recently, I think YouTube had popped up these things about the actor for Obi-Wan, Alec, what's his name? Can you remind me?
Ewan McGregor, or Sir Alec Guinness.
Yeah, the original one, Alec Guinness. Yeah. And it was really funny. Also, Alec Guinness, and then the other dude, the bad guy, Moff Tarkin, the Imperial officer. They both talked about Star Wars with such condescension. They were like, right. Yes, this thing.
They were a little embarrassed to be in it. Alec Guinness is, in particular, he was a Catholic that just thought all this Force stuff was just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. He did not get it at all. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but no, I think that was really funny because it was just like, now it's like a cultural like phenomenon that everybody knows about, and they're like talking about it like this is like kind of an embarrassing, like, can we just like move on to my actual acting, my actual projects? But I mean, Star Wars Episode 4, obviously it started everything off, and I've always been impressed by the universe that Star Wars Episode 4 just created right off the bat. You know, some movies take a little time to really establish themselves as a world. You know, the whole mythos and the world of it. But I always love a story in which you feel like the world is tangible, like it's something that physical beings could actually be in and like operate and everything. All of these stories, it makes it more believable and more like you're a part of it. And there's a lot of movies today that really can't do that don't understand how to do that. Like, do you mind if I go negative for a second?
Sure.
From what we've seen from the little like trailers and little stills that have been released so far from HBO's Lord of the Rings series, it really looks like it's not going to be impressive, because it seems to be adopting this mentality of like make everything ultra like real, like the cameras need to be like every little blade of grass needs to be seen and everything. And I really don't like that kind of like filmmaking because it's not real. Like in real life, you don't notice every single high def blade of grass. Like you see certain things stand out more and certain things are like kind of blurry. Like that just makes more sense. And the whole world isn't just shiny and like clean. And I think Episode 4 was good because like I remember watching a documentary about something about the creation, and the set designers were like they made the beginning battle ship, that where it starts off in that battle, and they made the ship and the set for it, and then they went back and it was like, oh, that's too clean, and so they went back and like tarnished things and like dirtied it up and like made it more tangible. So I just think they did a really great job there of like creating a world that you feel is like something that's actually you're in there.
Absolutely. Sense. And that's something that was born of necessity. You hear that from these great movies so many times, that their limitations turned into the great strengths. Lucas was working with a limited budget. He didn't have the ability to show every single detail. In fact, he was hiding the fact that he didn't have money left and right. And it worked. It worked. That hiding, see, we don't see the world like computers see the world, which is why AI is having such a difficult time doing tasks that seem simple. We've had a podcast about that in the past with someone who works in AI. If we saw the world like a computer, we would record every single thing that happens over a set, like so, from beginning to end, and then it would just be a long list of every little detail and would be incredibly boring. It would read like a laundry list.
The entry points.
Yeah, exactly. However, we're not computers. Lucas didn't have the ability to record every single blade of grass. And so he didn't. He hid the fact that there wasn't a blade of grass there, that there was a movie set in that little dark shadow. And that worked remarkably well. It shows his chops as a world builder because he was hiding in the shadows the whole time. Like, don't look over there, look over here. It was remarkable. And a few other things that they did right. You already mentioned one, Alec Guinness. A wonderful job here, perfectly portraying that archetype of the wizard who guides the hero. But of course, and as any person who knows archetypes would guess, the guide has to die. You cannot guide the hero the whole way. He only goes up so far. And so he's gone at exactly the right moment. Another great character, Han Solo, almost anti-hero, not quite, someone who's on the edge. And Princess Leia makes that triangle between Luke, Han, and Princess Leia that they set up so well in this movie. It hits all the right beats. Shall we move on, though?
Yep. Let's move on.
So we're moving up the list a little bit, going to number 4, the Thrawn Trilogy by Timothy Zahn. It is a wonderful story that actually, Peter, you've not read. This was a Pinedo Brothers list. So it wasn't just Peter and I, but our third Pinedo brother, Joseph. We got together and we made this together. This is one of his favorite stories of all time. And so that informed our decision about this. The Thrawn trilogy never made it to the big screen, never made it to any of the TV shows, but it inspired so many different people who imagined this universe, who read this book and imagined the universe. It was how it takes up right at the end of the Luke Skywalker trilogy, the original trilogy, and throws him into this world that's in chaos. The Empire was evil, but it was also the structure, the order of the world. And now it's thrown into this unknown because there is no longer a backbone. There's no longer a government. And so there's all these warring factions trying to take hold. It's something that episode 7, 8, and 9 would have done well to pay a little bit more attention to, but they didn't. And Luke also has his own little love story, which is a remarkable romance. And there's just the great bad guys. Thrawn is a bad guy that makes you really be interested in this story. The stronger the protagonist, the stronger the villain has to be. And Luke Skywalker is a great protagonist. We already know that from episode 4. So this really creates an incredible story that's worth exploring.
Yeah. I think that the new series, it's not new now, but newer, the animated series Rebels, I think it has Thrawn in there. I think Thrawn is a big part of that series. So people, I'm sure lots of the creators of that series also read these books and must have really loved the character.
There's a lot of things that continue on. So besides the character of Thrawn, the world of Coruscant is a huge world that was created in this trilogy that shows up in the prequels. So episode 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah,
so
I didn't know that.
There's so many different things that the author in the Thrawn trilogy gets so right that they're like, we got to keep this. So it's worth the read if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet. Okay, moving on. Number 3, we have Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, the original video game. Peter, do you remember at all Joseph and I playing this when it came out on the Xbox?
No, I remember thinking it was really cool. I mean, obviously, because I loved Star Wars as a kid, and then it was like a whole new storyline with Jedis and everything. But I really don't remember too much about it. Not really, other than like the cinematic trailer things that they release.
Yeah, the cinematics are breathtaking.
It looks like they're just like extremely well animated, and they tell like really good little stories in like 5-minute videos. Some of the best like little 5-minute Star Wars things you'll ever see.
Yeah. And the story that you find in this, it is so good that even though I didn't really enjoy that type of gameplay when it came out, I was never a huge kind of turn-based RPG type of person, like Final Fantasy, that many gamers loved it. I was more of the action or shoot 'em up sort of thing where you're hack and slashing your way through. Think Jedi power battles.
I like that more too.
Yeah. However,
turn-based things.
Say that again?
I don't have the patience for turn-based things.
Yeah. Well, we had the patience for it because of how good the story was. They threw you into the mythology of good versus evil. And you took on you stepped into the shoes of someone who is in the middle of a hero's journey. And just like in Tolkien, you say that you're walking on the edge of the knife. In this story, you walked that edge of the knife. You could become good, you could become bad. And it wasn't some sort of trite, choose your own story, like everyone's seen those kind of books lying around. That's not what this was. This was actually presented you with characters that presented you issues. Do you spare this person? Do you let them live? Is this person worthy of mercy, or is everyone worthy of mercy? There's great Wookiee characters. There's great scoundrel characters. And I don't want to give away the end in case someone hasn't played it. You can play it on your mobile phone. But the story of the master and the apprentice and the relationship between the master and the apprentice, or the Dark Lord and the burgeoning Dark Lord, has never been better told. That sort of relationship that really episode 3 fell flat with Anakin and Darth Sidious, is knocked out of the park here. And it's completely worth it's not the watch, it's the play, worth the play, just so you can watch that relationship come about and see all the intricate details of something well told. Mm-hmm. That's really what's worth it.
Yeah. What did they get right about that evil master and evil apprentice storyline that they didn't get right in episode 3? I'm curious.
Well, the first thing they're able to do is it's a 30-hour, maybe 40-hour game. They
could really explore that dynamic a little bit more.
Well, you have more time to understand how someone who is the apprentice might feel and might think about the Dark Lord. And it explores that sort of, it's not a friendship, it's mutual use, but it also shows the respect that someone might have or doesn't have. And then what betrayal really means to someone who's helped you. Like, what does that look like to stab someone in the back? You never got that sense in episode 3, what it felt like for Anakin Skywalker to slaughter younglings. I don't feel as bad about giving away an important plot point in a movie that's not very good. But
if you haven't seen Star Wars episode 3, it's really on you. Like there's an expiration date on the obligation to not give spoilers on movies.
I don't know about that, but I don't feel as bad about giving away spoilers to bad movies because you're not missing as much. And unfortunately, that is a bad movie. And it feels at all times rushed. They had 3 movies. You could have had 9 hours worth of storytelling, but you never really explored how a Dark Lord and his apprentice would feel. It's almost immediately he becomes a Dark Lord right off the bat. And he's going around slaughtering younglings. That's not what happens in this. It's all by degrees. There's a saying that the church has is that the devil doesn't get you all at once to kill someone or to commit some grave mortal sin. The devil gets you by degrees with little things, little lies here and there, which surely stray you off the path. And that's what would happen with someone, an apprentice and a Dark Lord. It's these little things that slowly but surely stray you off the path. And the relationship between evil that even the best people with the best intentions have.
It tells a little bit more like a fleshed out story of a fall to darkness, right?
Or not.
In Star Wars episode 3, it was just kind of confusing, I think, for the person watching the movie to understand how this great, Clone Wars hero, Anakin Skywalker, because at the start they portray him as like a fun-loving, like adventurer, and then, 3/4 the way through the movie, all of a sudden he's like, super evil, and you're like, wait,
he's killing little kids with his bare hands.
Mm-hmm. So.
That doesn't make sense. That's always been frustrating to me. It's supposed to be some big moment, but it just falls flat. But this video game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, does not fall flat. So staying on the positive. Shall we move on to number 2?
Check it out. Number 2. What's number 2?
All right, Peter, why don't you do the honors with this one? Because I think this one was really your doing.
Yeah, well, number 2, we want to talk about the Clone Wars series. Specifically, for anyone who's watched the Clone Wars, this is an animated show about what happened in between episode 2 and 3. And it really dives a lot more into the characters and explores them a lot more. Not to get off track, but it explores Anakin and the Emperor's relationships. And so it kind of delves a little bit more into that kind of like corrupting ideas that he plants in. And that relationship. So it kind of makes a little bit more sense by episode 3. But obviously people who haven't seen the show won't get that. But something that the Clone Wars did a really great job at was fleshing out the clones as characters. And so there was this reoccurring storyline throughout the entire show of the Squad Domino Squad. They started off as cadets and rookies, as the young, inexperienced clones who didn't really know what was going on, but they wanted to be right where the action was. And as time goes on, you see them really develop as not just faceless clones, but as men who start off as young, kind of hero types, and they kind of mature and grow, and then also become grizzled at the experiences that they've been throughout the war. And which is really, it's kind of like Clone Wars is thought of as a kid show, and it was a kid show pretty much, but it really dealt with some really heavy, like hard topics that even the movies didn't really get into that often. But the idea of having a clone army that was, made for war was really they delved into that really deeply in the Clone Wars, because like these are in the show, they make them like three-dimensional characters who have feelings, and yet they were made for this express purpose of fighting and dying. And so they're always like trying to reconcile that with themselves. Like they have multiple of these conversations, these clones, Domino Squad throughout the show, like trying to reconcile that the purpose that they were created for and what they actually want.
And we ought to say too that this, unlike the other things that we've mentioned, we're referring not to the show at large, because the show at large is rather uneven. It's got a lot of storylines that are just not very good. But if you look at the beginning, middle, and end of Domino Squad specifically, which is what you showed, you kind of cherry picked those episodes and we watched them together. And it blew me away, because exactly how you're saying, the intricacies of these people that were clones created for war. It's a morality play, really, when it comes down to it, because we could create clones almost. This is something that's not so far-fetched. What does it mean to create war machines that are people that live? What does that look like? What do these people experience? And then suppose that they're programmed to do something horrendous. How would they feel? How would they feel if they're programmed to turn their backs on their friends, the people that they admire and who they've saved their lives many times and who've saved their lives many times? Which I'm referring to Order 66, of course, which is really the climax of all this, is them discovering that they're going, well, we don't want to give away too much, but it's the climax is that.
They did a really, really good job closing out the series. I think it really pulled on your heartstrings. It's really, and it's kind of heartbreaking to watch the whole show, because they have these characters who start off as young rookies, and slowly throughout the show, like each season, a couple of members of the squad die, and then another friend is lost, another important character is lost. And each time, like you can see it in the clones' like faces, that they make them look more mature each season, because they've seen more things, and more of their friends have died, until the end. One of the last seasons, the character finds out, he learns about the Order 66, in it's like an inhibitor chip or some kind of brainwash mechanism that they have in their mind. He learns about it, and so he tries to do everything to warn people about it, and slowly just like everybody dies. Everyone who knows they die, until the final character. Just one guy left. There's one member of the squad, and he goes through some horrific things. Like he's
quite the hero.
Yeah, you're just like, oh my gosh, is this a kid's show? Like this guy, he's captured and he's tortured, and he's pretty much made unrecognizable. Go ahead. And
really, I think that's what makes this not number one, is the fact that the animation is so, it's made haphazardly, it's slipshod. It's not made for something, it's not made like with an anime with the attention to detail and with the eye for beauty so much, which kind of shows it to be, it's clumsy. You think, oh, a kid show when you look at it, but the storyline is not. The storyline is beautiful. And for the fact, I probably would have voted it to be number one, but for the fact that the animation doesn't have that same sort of sophistication that the storyline has.
There are some arcs, and I'm really thinking of there's an Umbara series that really delves into the clone story a lot. That they are very artistically designed, but like you were saying earlier, it is kind of it's a little uneven in terms of quality throughout the show. So the animation, it doesn't really compare, but there's some that are artistically designed. but the story, it stands on its own as something that, could really transfer very well into a film, just because of the understanding that it gives for these men who are machines of war. They are seen as by the Republic, by the powers above them, as cannon fodder. Nothing that their lives are not accounted for. It's not a priority, not even a consideration, except for there's a few heroes like Anakin and Obi-Wan who actually care.
It really shows how Anakin and Obi-Wan were good men, that they cared about these individuals, these clones. And it shows how they were heroes, which the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3, really didn't show them as heroes. Maybe Obi-Wan a little bit, but not so much. And this show delves into what a hero looks like on a day-to-day basis. And it really is quite beautiful.
It's fun to see. Definitely. It's better than The Mandalorian. I'll definitely say that.
Yeah. Well, okay. Speaking of things that are not quite up to snuff, I wonder if do you mind playing a quick game, Peter?
Yeah. Play a game.
You don't mind? Okay, cool. So before we get to number 1, you got your piece of paper and pen out?
Yes.
Okay. So I would like you to write right off the top of your head, what is the 3rd worst Star Wars film? And I'll do the same, or a Star Wars story. Doesn't have to be film. Star Wars story. And then we'll compare real quickly.
3rd worst?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Ready and reveal.
Star Wars.
Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
Mine says Rogue One.
Okay, Peter, why Rogue One as the 3rd worst?
Rogue One it was like one of those stories that everyone, like lots of people actually really do like Rogue One, because they're like, oh, it's so dark and gritty. It's like more realistic. And you're like, no. To me, when I watched the movie, it was a series of conveniences for the main characters to just find themselves in victory. And the only reason they end up dying is because of a plot device where they have to die. What didn't even make sense for them to die at the end of the story. There was no stakes. There was no tangibility. It was one of the dumbest things I'd ever watched. It was just to see like this guy who uses the Force just like walks through a line of fire with no one hitting him. It's like, this is just sloppy storytelling. Right. And then like these people, they are coming in a spaceship, to kidnap these kids and like kill these parents, and they land like 3 football fields away and then just over to give them time to escape. Like it doesn't make sense. It was just really terrible storytelling in my mind.
Well, it deserves to be. It's not on my list, and it won't be in a future pick because I'm not interested in choosing that one. It deserves to be on the top 3 worst list, but for that one scene, and I turned it off when I saw that. I wasn't watching in theaters. I was watching it someplace at home.
I watched theater.
Well, the scene that I turned it off on was when the blind guy with the stick started knocking over all the stormtroopers. And I can get by stormtroopers getting killed by blaster fire. I kind of roll my eyes sometimes because I'm like, what's the armor there for? But if the armor can't withstand a stick, a blind man's stick, I'm sorry. You lost me. I mean, there was a reason why the Ewoks didn't really work, and you think they would have learned, but nope, here we go again.
No, they refused to learn. No. Yeah, this hurts, right?
It did hurt. It did hurt to watch it. All right. Shall we do 2nd worst of all time?
2nd worst? Okay.
All right, here we go.
Oh, where's the camera? Hey.
We switched. I'm Star Wars Episode 9, whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called.
Actually, I don't know what Episode 8 is called either.
I did watch it. I actually sat all the way through it.
Oh, wow.
It's on Episode 9, I mean.
Yeah.
So me going first on why Episode 9 is 2nd worst of all time as far as Star Wars stories goes. it's just doesn't make any sense at all. Like even up to the very end, like, oh, I have to die so that you can not die. And then, oh no, I need to die so that you don't have to die. And it's like, guys, this is kind of funny now. This is not, and they're playing it up like it's some huge thing. And they're just like killing each other so that the other one can live. It's just a little embarrassing. It's just not good. The only thing that you can say good about Star Wars Episode 9, in my mind, is that it's not as bad as the first worst of all time. Okay. Tell me about Star Wars Episode 8, whatever it's called.
I think I might have messed up the game a little bit. I meant to put Episode 9 as well.
Okay, don't tell me about Episode 8. Let's write the first worst. I'll write the first worst. You write the second worst, and then we'll try and unmismatch each other. Okay, you ready?
Okay, hold on. So fast. I'm trying to remember all the Star Wars stories. I don't even remember them all. There's so many.
I sprung this game on you. Sorry.
I mean, it's gonna be unoriginal, but.
All right, we actually have the exact same first and second worst. I'm Star Wars Episode 8 for the all-time worst Star Wars story ever told is Star Wars Episode 8. And you have Star Wars Episode 8 as well for the worst story ever told, but 9 is second. Okay.
For me, like 9 was really terrible because of Episode 8, because it was just, it tried to retcon so much, like it tried to fix so much from Episode 8 because they realized.
Oh, wait, we didn't mean it. That was terrible. You all hate it. We're going to try and delete that.
And Episode 9 was also just full of things that like just story-wise did not make any sense. Like there's a scene in the end where like there's some kind of like space horses who are riding on top of a Star Destroyer ship, like in the upper atmosphere. And you're like, what? Why is there a cavalry battle happening on top of a spaceship? Like this doesn't make any sense at all. And how are they not just flying off? Like, do physics not apply at all in Star Wars? But the thing that was worst about Episode 9 was Episode 8, because Episode 8 was just a complete embarrassment to everybody. Everywhere. Just watching it, you're embarrassed. You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it was written by someone who and made and directed by someone who didn't like Star Wars, who doesn't really understand why Star Wars was great. And I think that's the director's actual story. They managed to find one director out there, probably the only one, at least the only male director out there, that didn't like Star Wars, and they gave him a bunch of money to make Star Wars Episode 8. And that kind of shows what happens when you get someone who doesn't like the world to play in it, because it does not go well. Star Wars Episode 8, without a doubt for me, is the worst Star Wars film ever told, because you try to make it not a mythology. That's the whole point of this. And this is why I wanted to talk about this with you. Is that Star Wars not Episode 8, Star Wars in general, we have a relationship with them. As Catholics, when we went to Mass this past Sunday, we celebrated the Trinity, Holy Trinity Sunday. And it was not just Catholics, Lutherans and some other faiths as well have Holy Trinity Sunday. And what we know from revealed scripture about the Trinity is that God the Father was and is, and proceeding from the Father is the Son. And then the relationship between the Father and the Son is the Holy Spirit. And thus the three persons in one God that we as Christians worship and know and strive to be in a relationship with, and realize with incredible gratitude that he wants to be in a relationship with us, and thus makes this reciprocity possible. Well, this is mirrored in a small way with how we interact with mythologies. We interact with mythologies in a way that's reciprocal. So mythologies mirror some sort of reality that exists. We can't really explain. We don't really know why it's there, how it's there, but it is. Just like Cinderella in Sleeping Beauty and Pinocchio and all of these timeless tales reveal things about ourselves and reveal much about the culture from whence they came. Star Wars reveals our shared experience as a culture. It shows what we experience, what we know about our world, and it throws it onto a screen. And the reason why we resonate with it is because we share that experience and realize that it's true. So in that way, there's a reality, and then there's the storyteller that sees that reality, so that's there, and then there's us, and we experience this also shared reality. Then the storyteller tells the mythology. So from the storyteller and us, the mythology comes, and we influence that mythology, and the storytellers take that and they change it around as we're influencing it. And thus people that influence take it and they make new stories with it. And it's a reciprocity work back and forth. We're influencing it as it's influencing us. And anyone can tell a story of a mythology. Anyone can take Star Wars and tell a story, just like Zahn did with a Thrawn trilogy, just like Knights of the Republic did. The Clone Wars isn't a perfect example because it is kind of heavily influenced by Lucas. But the fact of the matter is that it can come from anywhere and it becomes part of this world. And that's exactly what we see becoming undone in episode 8. We see that the world is not, it's not what it is, it's what it ought to be. It's like, okay, well, we want to rewrite all the archetypes. Luke is not really heroic. He's really just kind of, lazy. We got to write him out because he's not really heroic. When you spent the whole time earlier setting up a hero, you try to make him not a hero. And then you say, well, it's not what it is. It's not what that reality, which we all know is out there. It's some other sort of something. And you make Rey, who, instead of putting on her hero's journey where she constantly fails, which is reality, the hero always fails. How many times have we tried to do something and got it right the first time and it changed the world? Well, most people don't actually ever change the world. And those that do change the world, they fail a lot getting there. Rey manages to never fail once in her life, and she manages to change the world. That's not reality. Obviously, none of this is really like the world that we live in. We don't have laser swords, and we don't walk on Death Stars, and there's not lightning bolts shooting out of people's fingertips. But it's a reflection of what we all know is true. And so when you take something and you say, well, that's not how it should be. It should be something different from what we all experience and know as being an archetype and built on something that's lasted and stood the test of time.
Yeah, it's an empty story, right? It's one that is built on pretty much the reverse of what we know to be true, right? And so it doesn't resound. It doesn't. A story is kind of like a song, right? Where there's the ups and the downs in the song, and then it ends with that like one satisfying note that you need to hear at the end. And if you're started off the song, you started off with this completely perfect, note that doesn't open any kind of story for the rest of doesn't leave you wanting any more. If your characters are all like pristine and perfect, then there's no story, right? There's no conflict. There's nothing that you can connect with and relate to with the character. And I think it makes you just dislike them more. It makes you, I don't want to say jealous. What is the word I'm looking for? But it makes you dislike them because of this perfection that is just not realistic.
That's right. That's right. We want to see our heroes struggle because we know we all struggle. We want to see our heroes fail because we know we all fail. Right.
It's something that it elevates you. It elevates your struggles to be able to see another hero struggle and fail, because then you connect with them and like, hey, like maybe I also am a hero in this story that it's going on, and it lifts you up in that way.
Exactly. And I just realized that I never said why, for me, the third worst Star Wars story of all time is Star Wars Episode 2. Well, the reason why I chose that is, there's a lot of reasons, but I'll just say one so we don't get too mired down in negativity. The storyline between Padme and Anakin, those scenes, oh my gosh, they were so cringy. They were so hard to watch. I remember, like, to watch that, I would like to watch it again after sitting through it the first time. I would just fast forward. I couldn't. It's like, they were so bad. And I'm not sure if it was the script's fault or the actor's fault or both. I mean, Padme, Natalie Portman's gone on to show that she's actually a pretty decent actor, so it couldn't have just been her. But maybe she learned. Maybe she was bad at the time. Actors can learn and they can get better. Anyway, that Episode 2 was third worst Star Wars story of all time in my book. All right, so shall we move on to the best? Number one in this list of the top 5 Star Wars stories of all time is Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Peter, tell me about Star Wars Empire Strikes Back.
Well, the first image that comes to mind when I think of Empire Strikes Back is I think of the giant foot of the AT-AT like just crashing down. Like the Episode 4 did a masterful job of creating a world, and then Episode 5 just like blew that out of the water by just completely igniting the imagination. Like these battles
of a generation,
insane, just because of their creativity and their ability to just like blow your mind. And then of course the storyline is just, it blows Episode 4 out of the water as well. The storyline, of course, between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. It's hard to think of, it's very rare, I would say, of a storyline where the main villain and the main hero are so connected, where their stories are intertwined. And that really increases the drama in a story so much when these two main characters are, diametrically opposed, but so interlinked in so many ways. What are you liking? What do you like about it? So,
I want to continue talking about the hero's journey here that we see with Luke. He gets just every single time, everything that could happen to Luke happens to Luke. And he just keeps failing and failing and failing. He goes out in the snow and gets lost in the snow, and a snow monster knocks him unconscious, and then he can't save the base from the attacking force, and then he can't do the training, and then he fails. Well, before he even starts, he can't do the training. He fails to recognize who the wizard is that's supposed to train him. He can't save his friends. He gets his hand chopped off. I mean, it's everything. This whole movie, this hero fails, and yet you realize that he's a hero, and you keep willing for him to win. Why? Because he's virtuous. Our heart recognizes virtue. It sees, oh, okay, there's something in that I want. And you see that with Luke Skywalker. And you see how he is deathly afraid of this incredible villain. This whole movie just makes Darth Vader. I mean, Han Solo is really good, but he is shown to be no match for Darth Vader. He's too powerful. He's too smart. He's got too many resources. Darth Vader is too much of a badass. He can't, no matter how great Han Solo is, and we know how great he is. He just helped Luke blow up the Death Star in Episode 4. But he can't escape. You think he's escaped, and yet boom, Darth Vader brings him back. It's just an amazing villain that we see on full display. And we realize our poor little hero has no chance. And yet we know that this hero has to face Darth Vader. Obviously, since we don't have Episode 6 on this list, we don't think Episode 6 truly lives up to it. But that doesn't matter. There's still a beginning, middle, and end in this story that's self-contained. And that's why it's number 1 on my list.
Yeah, absolutely masterful. Just love it.
Great. Well, I know that we're running short of time, so why don't we end that here? Unless there's any parting thoughts, Pete.
Well, I mean, we are honored that you would join us. If you're not a super nerd, That's from episode 5. Darth Vader says it.
I remember you walking down the hallway. You were breathing like Darth Vader after, because you would watch that film when you just wanted to be Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And he would walk like that. It just influenced everyone. We imagine evil with a different face because of Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about success.
Yeah, one of the greatest villains, I would say. Absolutely.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed watching this little podcast and like our list of both the top 3 worst and the top 3 best Star Wars, our top 5 best Star Wars films. We'd love to hear what you think. If your favorite Star Wars story is not on the list, drop us a note in the comments. Or if your worst Star Wars story. Yeah.
If it's one of our worst, we also want to know.
Yeah, drop it in the comments, please. Yes. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All of those really help. All right, Pete. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you. Until next time, we'll see y'all in the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pinedo Brothers Podcast, an artist podcast for Catholics. We hope you enjoyed it. This episode was edited and recorded by me, JP. Makeup was done by no one, if you couldn't tell. The Pinedo Brothers are Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art through film. For more information on us, check us out at pinedobrothers.com. Thanks again.